Yeah, as people are filtering in, I just want to make sure that we have a full schedule today, and we got some amazing speakers for our group, and so I just want to make sure we keep on track. So we're going to get going as people filter in. And I know people are going to be walking with their food as we're talking. That's fine. But one, thank you everybody for being here. We put on a Constellation meeting twice a year for portfolio companies of ours and partners. And we really try to make it a good use of people's time because we appreciate how valuable everybody's time is. But the whole idea here is to focus on areas that are critical for our Constellation members, issues that they're talking about, and really trying to help accelerate their business. And so, you've seen the program we've got today. It's, we think, quite compelling. But what is most impressive to me is just the group that's come here and dedicated a day to really make themselves better and to help accelerate their business. So to kick things off, we want to start with a bang, and we are, and we're going to make news this morning because we got the new CEO of Yahoo, Dan Rosensweig. I'm just kidding. As there's been much speculation, but Dan is a longtime friend of mine and is a phenomenal CEO and a real huge person in the media world. We've been fortunate to be an investor in Chegg, which is a pretty significant position for GSV Capital. But Dan's just an amazing entrepreneur and visionary. So what we're going to do, the whole purpose of today is focus on how do we, lead generation, how do we bring customers in, how do we keep customers or members active and loyal. And it's all about, what are the fundamentals of that. And so Dan has been an expert in this world for 25 plus years.
Which is amazing because I'm 30.
Right. So he was president of Ziff Davis. He was the president of Yahoo. Was in the private equity.
I'm just going to correct you because it's filmed. I was CEO of ZDNet. I was publisher of PC Magazine. I was CEO of ZDNet. I was chief operating officer of Yahoo, because we didn't have a president. And
I just always inflate everything you do.
I usually do too, but not when there's a camera. And then CEO of Guitar Hero. I spent an hour in private equity. By the way, if you're ever going to go into private equity, the day to do it is not the day Lehman collapses. That was my very first day at work. And so I had to learn a few things. What's a Lehman? What's a collapse? And what does it mean there's no credit? Right? So, or available capital. So I did that, and then I went to Guitar Hero for a year, and then I've been at Chegg now, closing in on 6 years.
Yeah.
That's my background.
So let's go to Chegg first. And as it relates to Chegg, you're creating basically the most important student graph in the world. Talk about, one, just get current in terms of the number of high school seniors that are on the Chegg platform and the number of college students as a percentage of the overall college population.
So I'll dial back just a little bit and give them the specifics because in the topic that you want to talk about, which is essentially the business side of these things, forget the sexy side of these things. The business side of these things is your customers are either your direct-to-consumer or your B2B. And there are attributes that are similar, but the one thing that matters more than anything in the internet space, particularly if you're doing B2C, is scale. If you're subscale, you won't matter because the unit economics of the internet space don't matter. If you can't get a large group and if you can't keep them for a long time and if you can't give them other things to do, then the unit economics don't succeed. So if you look at what Amazon has done, which is pretty extraordinary, everything they do is about acquiring more customers and everything they do is about getting their customers to do more with them. Even on the B2B side with the cloud stuff. So in the case of Chegg, when we took it over, all we did was rent physical print textbooks. We spent a lot of capital to buy them. We warehoused them. We had to acquire customers. We had to figure out the unit economics of how much do you pay for a book? How much can you rent a book for? How often do you rent it? When do you liquidate it? If you liquidate it, can you get a profit on the liquidation? And it was very confusing business. No one had done it before. So the one thing, there were a series of things that we just determined at the very beginning. They were like, we don't know if these are true, but we're just going to have to make these assumptions. The first one is, it's not okay to have a relationship that is that capital intensive, that's 4 days a year, which is rent, return, rent, return. That just not survivable. The second thing is we needed to figure out how to build a relationship with them over a longer period of time. So not just more times during their college, but before college and then after college. So everything we've done is to build a platform that starts earlier with them and stays longer and does things more often with them over the course of each of those areas. So in the high school space now, we help students find scholarships. We help them determine what's the right college to apply to. Colleges pay us to recruit students based on the graph that you articulated, which is, who are they? What do you know about them? Where are they from? What are their economic status? What are their grades? Will they be appropriate for this school? Once we get them into college, the next thing we do now is we help them get their required material, which we can now buy it new, buy it used, rent it, get it digital. And it's always cheaper than the normal sources of what they do. From there, we now have a lot of data. We have your high school, we have the college you're at, we have the class you're at, we have the textbook you need. So from there now, we're able to offer you assistance in getting a better grade. So we have homework help, which is our Chegg study product, which is a juggernaut. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's a non-required material that's a subscription service that over 1 million students pay for, which is pretty remarkable when there's only 18 million students in higher education. Now we know your class. We can guess your major using our data. And as a result of guessing your major, we can start to bring you other things. First of all, in addition to homework help, we can bring you on-demand tutoring, Uber for tutors. You can get a tutor in any subject, anytime, day or night, live, video, audio, text-based, or asynchronous if you want, for as little as 75 cents a minute. And students don't like subscriptions if they don't have to. They hate their cable subscription. They hate their phone subscription. So you can actually do it on demand by minute if you want. So if you only need help for 2 minutes, it's $1.50. And it's like Uber in that we recruit the tutors, we set the price, we own the relationship, everything is secure through the system. Then after that, since we now know all that about you, we have the largest internship database. So we're able to do two things: let you use the database to search what you're interested in, and now we know what you're interested in. But also because we know your college, and we know other kids that have gone to your college, and we know your major, we know other kids that have had that major, we can actually start matching you to the internship without you even having to search. So we use that data that you talked about, similar to Facebook, similar to LinkedIn, to match you to internships. From there, the next step is obviously going to be matching you to the skills that you don't have for the jobs that you're interested in. And then the logical next step after that is going to be getting you your first job. So we've moved from 4 days a year to 365 days a year. We've moved from just college to high school, college, and eventually career. So we've expanded all that. That's led to the numbers that you asked about. But the numbers only make sense in that context, in my opinion. So we have access through a combination of organic names that we have, deals that we have to acquire them, and platforms that we power to 75% of all high school students that intend to go to college. So obviously, logically, we should be offering high school students things when we know they want to go to college. Say, for example, like test prep. So we have an alpha form of test prep that we put in the market. Over 12,000 students have already tested it. So we know there's a demand for it. Even if it's free, which it is right now, getting 12,000 high school students to do anything online and spend several hours with a product instead of someone else's to try to get them a better grade tells you we're on to something, in our opinion. So we're going to constantly bring more things, but in the college ranks, 1 out of every 2 college students in this country today uses Chegg for something. Now, people like Mike and myself, been around a long time, know Chegg for a long time, still refer to it incorrectly as a textbook renter. It's like saying Amazon sells books and CDs. That's what we were. It's where we started. We are the student hub now. And just to give you a statistic that blows my mind is today's customer of Chegg, 70% of them use us for something other than renting a print textbook. And so in the minds of our customers, we've made that transition in their mind to the brand. They've given us permission to bring them more products and services. And that's why we're not only able to get such huge reach, but our engagement is up. Our homework help product, they use 1.5 times a week. Because I had a tremendous board member named Barry McCarthy, who's now the CFO of Spotify. So he left the board to move over seas to help them take Spotify public eventually. But he was the CFO of Netflix, and he asked a Netflixy kind of question, because we were new to the consumer world, and he said, is this an a la carte business masquerading as a subscription, or is it really a subscription service? So we did two things. We said, let's find out the frequency of use, and 1.5 times a week tells you it's more than an a la carte business, because renewals were over 5 months in a row. And so we also put in a policy that says, if you don't use the service, we'll cancel it for you after a period of time. So everything we do puts the student first. That has put us in a position to have over half of college students and access to 75% of all high school students who intend to go to college. So very long statistical answer, but I wanted to give you guys the setup, because as young as you all look, none of you look like you're in college right now.
So you talked about the tutoring business that you acquired, but it was basically a concept when you acquired it.
Yeah, it was 23 people in San Francisco with almost zero revenue.
Right.
That's a concept.
And I don't know if you disclose how big it is, but it's become pretty significant in a short period of time.
We don't give the numbers, but what I would say is last year we had several 100,000 students use the service, and this year it's going to be significantly larger. It just makes common sense. The thing is, we shouldn't use the word tutoring. We all got to break out of our minds. How many of you went to like a top 25 school? Almost all of you probably. Well, Stanford's not that good, so put your hand down. And you were a knucklehead football player. I mean, how did you have time to go to school? You played every damn position. Oh, different. But the concept of on-demand learning makes a great deal of sense to this generation. And it didn't make a lot of sense to me, so we actually took a year to buy it. And I finally asked my daughter, who was in college, I said, will you do me a favor? Whenever we're buying anything, I ask my college-age daughters to test it, because as good as I am at things like physics and calculus, I'm not as current as I should be. Like, I don't know it at all. So better to have college kids actually look at this stuff. And I remember when we looked at Crampster, which is now Chegg Study, and she was still in high school, I said, I'll give you a password, will you check it? And she said, oh, I already subscribed to it. I was like, oh, good to know. And then on the tutoring side, the first thing she said, she's like, oh, not only would I use this, but I can actually make money being a tutor. So she became a tutor. And so these two-way marketplaces are really cool.
And I guess where I was going is, one, you've been able to scale very quickly, but part of that is because...
Bob's here now. Should we make our announcement again? Bob, you missed it. Mike announced that you and I are going to run Yahoo together.
I know Bob was...
But I'm going to be the CFO.
But where I was going is the data that you've been able to utilize from the overall network and then apply it to the tutoring service. How do you, what are you able to mine that allows you to target what the student's actually looking for and make that an effective offering, and how you've been able to get traction so fast? So
we refer to it as Project Fender. It's our most significant investment. We have 32 data scientists, and for those politically correct police in the room, 52% of them are women, believe it or not. They're from 9 countries with 120 advanced degrees, and they are heads down in what looks like the Matrix to me. They're just inside the data. So let me tell you the obvious stuff, the stuff that you all experience as a consumer of Netflix or Spotify or Amazon, which is, we know what you've done, therefore we should logically bring you the next thing you should be doing. So if you're in a class and you come in for this textbook, and we know that that class has 3 other textbooks, we obviously put them right on the screen for you and say, well, if you're in this class, here's all your textbooks. That's a piece of data that just makes common sense from a transaction perspective. The more complicated stuff, Mike, the stuff that you like, the stuff that you help inspire a lot, is the stuff we're working on now, which will take much longer, which is, if we know what school you're in, and if we know your major, and if we know your grades, and then if we know the kinds of careers that you're interested in, and we know other people that have gone to your school and are also interested in those same things, and we know where they got a job or we know where they got an internship, can we be making a more effective match? And the same thing holds true for high school, because we really want to improve outcomes. If we know where you went to high school and others that went to that high school, and then where they went to college with the similar grades, and then what career paths they took 10 years ago, and if we can build a loan calculator, which we're working on, that says if you want to go to this path this way, you can afford to take out this much loan because your likely ROI is going to be this. These are the long-term horizons of what data allows you to do. And it's not 20 years away, it's just getting enough critical mass of the right data and enough history of people that have come through the system to be able to make more effective matches. So we all use Facebook. You know, the easiest one is, well, you're friends with so-and-so, do you also want to be friends with so-and-so? That's the logical one. But now you're starting to see ads that connect to your interests, to your passions, to other stories that you've read. All of this just gets simpler and simpler and simpler over time. And that's what Chegg is doing. We just have a massive knowledge base. Just think of what we have. Your high school, your college, all your classes, your textbooks, if you needed homework help in it. Oftentimes we have your grades if you supply it. We have your career aspirations, your internship aspirations. By the way, we also have your credit card. We have 4 million transactions. So the power of the platform over the next 5 or 10 years, I would just ask you, if we know more about this generation than anybody does as it relates to their academic aspirations and their career aspirations, who else can compete with that? Everybody else competes for a singular transaction. Nobody else, it's like LinkedIn, nobody else is competing on the platform basis. Or like Facebook, and what Facebook brilliantly has done, and I truly mean brilliantly, is they don't worry about any of this stuff. They say, look, if communications is evolving, we're going to own WhatsApp. If photo sharing is going to be done not only on Facebook, but off Facebook, we're going to own Instagram. They protect their flank. And that's different than what internet companies used to be, which is buy them and merge them in. Now it's like, no, I just want to control all the communications. We want to do that for education.
Yeah, and for those of you that don't know in the room, Dan was involved, you know, they almost, at Yahoo, almost were able to buy Facebook early days and did make the investment in Alibaba, which obviously is worth, you know, $1 zillion today.
And clearly I did not make a personal investment, or I would not be sitting here talking to any of you
But
at this time of morning.
But part of my point is, you've seen, and you go back to early days of the internet, how has marketing on the internet changed in terms of what it takes to develop a relationship with somebody and to keep that relationship from the early days to where we're at today?
So because I've been engaged with the internet since 1996, I've seen, and I use a lot of these terminologies, which is sometimes you're the windshield and sometimes you're the bug. You always want to be the windshield, but in the technology space, there are going to be moments, and those moments can feel forever, but they're not, where you're the bug. So for example, when I was at Yahoo, we became the windshield again. Then along came Google and along came Facebook. Today, Facebook's the windshield. Up till this week, Apple was the windshield, right, for the last 10 years. Every technology company hits it. The ones that have extraordinary management teams make better decisions, get some good luck, they come through it. So if you take Adobe, for example, they were a windshield for 25 years, they were the bug for 5 years, now they're the windshield again because of the extraordinary work of Shantanu Narayan and his management team going from packaged goods software to cloud-based software. But my bigger point here is there are things that have evolved. So back in the day, you were the big winner in marketing if you paid for a portal relationship. Amazon, eBay, they were all locking up, right? They were all locking up Excite and InfoSeek and Yahoo and AOL as the big partnerships, and they paid a lot to be integrated. Then Amazon taught us a lesson, which is Amazon said, I'm going to do that until I build enough critical mass, and then I'm going to say, screw all that. And they built their own program to not be dependent on anybody. And that's what Prime's about. If you look at Prime, Prime is the equivalent of spending marketing dollars to bring somebody into your site. And I don't look at it as any different than that. The way they do it, which is they buy media, they buy music, free shipping. Free shipping is becoming less important because it's now going to become same-day shipping, so they needed to evolve Prime. But the concept of lock the customer in has not been lost on them, and it's been brilliant. And despite the fact that they're down 9% today, which is a joke because they'll be up 50% tomorrow, they have figured out that you don't want to be dependent on any one or two sites. Then we all moved to search engine optimization, and that's where you got all of the comparative shopping engines, whether they were in travel or they were in e-commerce or whatever they were in, right? So you had Expedia and Travelocity and all of these people who would optimize SEO, and then we learned this thing called Google can screw you at any time by changing their algorithm. So guys like Bob would say these earnings are great, but they're not secure because if they change the algorithm or if you get out-indexed, you're at risk. So you can have an extraordinarily high-growth, high-margin business that can go away. And I experienced that when Yahoo bought a company called Kelku in France. French company, #1 in everything, growing like crazy, chased it for 6 years. The day the deal closed, in France, Kelku's search index went from #1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to the 10th page. Chinese internet companies were ahead of us. So you can't tell me that Google can't screw you up if they don't want to. Right? Because we bought it to buy 11% more market share for search in Europe. So they obviously didn't want us to do that. So search engine optimization is absolutely core, it's absolutely critical, but if you become dependent on it, you're at risk. So everybody does search engine marketing. What you've learned though is because it's marketplace pricing, everybody that's in your space advertises the same day. Therefore, the price is optimized or maximized for Google, not so much for you. So the cost of customer acquisition at your peak times is at its highest. So the trend then was, well, we got this new thing called mobile. Everybody create their own app. We're not going to have to worry about all those guys. It turns out there's 1 billion apps. So how do you get, in the case of a student, the average student has 27 apps on their screens, which means 3 pages to them. They don't count the number of apps, they just don't want more than 3 pages of scrolling. How do you become one of those or 2 of those or 5 of those 27s? That's something that people haven't quite figured out. So because of Facebook and because of what BuzzFeed has taught us on Facebook, which is you can produce sponsored content, people are now using Facebook a lot more, and I was on Maria Bartiromo yesterday, and I said, look, Facebook has taken over the optimal position. They are a juggernaut. There's nobody who's going to touch them for 5 years. Nobody. I don't care what anybody does. They are unimpeded, in my opinion, for 5 years, because they've got first buy, biggest buy. So the customer marketing has now become more spread out. You can't depend on one source. If you're trying to get an investment or you're trying to invest in something, if somebody's on one source, don't do it. The risk is too high. So you got to be really good at SEM, really good at SEO, really good at Facebook advertising. You got to be really good at apps. Then you got to be really good at CRM, right? Which is once you acquire a customer, the old adage remains true. It's cheaper to maintain a customer than it is to get the next customer. So if you look at companies like Reputation.com or LifeLock, and they're always chasing the next customer, at scale, it doesn't get cheaper. At scale, it gets more expensive because they're chasing the customer that is further from the core. So for us, everything we do once we acquire a customer is about engagement. How frequently can we get them to come back? How long can we get them to use the site? And it's not to create more inventory to sell them ads. It's so that the cost of acquiring them gets much cheaper. And our customer acquisition cost as a result of this in 6 years has gone down from $26 to $350. So companies like Adobe, which I'm on the board of, but also other companies like Salesforce and Oracle, you see them acquiring all these other CRM type companies. How do you optimize once you get them in? How do you make your site better? How do you make it faster? How do you connect with your customer more often? That's the new form of marketing. Whatever you pay on the front end is directly connected into the other forms of the relationship you can have with them. So it's, again, long-winded answer, but I wanted you to understand the evolution of what's happened. Back in the day, it was a portal relationship. Then it was Google search and Google SEO. Now, that's a risky venture if that's all you have. And so really now it's about building and maintaining a constant relationship with your customer by evolving the number of things that they can do.
And I'm going to ask one more question, then I'm going to open it to the audience to get your questions ready.
Has this been helpful at all?
Oh, this is awesome.
Good, because I'm barely awake.
It's a coffee.
Tea.
More tea, sorry. So I was talking last night with Rob Pace, who's here, a longtime friend, and
That guy in the back.
back in the blue shirt, good looking at the blue shirt. And we're talking about this.
Good-looking guys in blue shirts.
Yeah, I know. And this kind of mega trend of, it used to be about, what was the kind of the inputs going in, but now for the customer relationship or for the company, it's really about what are the outputs or what is the result from a tutoring service, the notes, the helping to select the right major, helping select the right college. How are you measuring? How are you measuring outputs, and how has that affected that cost of keeping the person you got?
Yeah, so great question, which is basically, if you're a consumer and you use sites, and you all do, you're looking at your own ROI. And your own ROI could be very different depending on what your needs are. It could be immediacy. So for example, my daughter moved into an apartment, didn't have broadband, certainly was never going to get cable or a phone line. So for her, it was, how can I get MiFi, and how can I get it in an hour? And so for her, the return wasn't the cost, it was the speed. So each one of us as a consumer makes our own value proposition. The way we think about it as a business is we ask 3 questions. And these questions are core to everything that I do professionally, and sadly in my family life, probably personally also. First thing is, what problem are you solving for? If you cannot articulate the problem you're solving for, then you'll never know if you've solved it, because you can't have anything to measure against. You can't just say, let's do it and find out. You can say, I want to do this to solve this problem, and let's find out if it does. That's legitimate. The second question I ask all the time, and anybody who presents anything to me at Chegg, and any business, any investment we make, is, what's your definition of success? So we may do something in a category. So in the case of tutoring, the problem we're solving for in the mind of the student is that the infrastructure around learning doesn't exist for the frequency and the time of day that students need to learn. There are no office hours at 2 o'clock in the morning. There are no office hours at 4 o'clock if 15 people are in front of you. So most students in this country, not you or maybe your kids, work while they're in college. 2.5 million, more students go to community colleges in the state of California than go to the collective Ivy Leagues. So I just want you to understand what we're dealing with. 80% of students go to state schools. They work. Colleges are not designed for students that work. They have 9 to 5 office hours. So for us, we measure a lot of things, but the number one thing is we need to be available when a student needs it. And so one of the things that we measure, which affects the business, so our definition of success is, if a student comes in and can find a tutor, and they feel that that tutor has helped them, that's success for us. It turns out we can create huge demand. The difficulty has been building supply of tutors, because when you're doing on-demand anything, like Uber, they didn't know how many cars they needed in a city at 5 o'clock at night. We didn't know how many tutors we needed in calculus at 4 o'clock in the morning, until you actually learn. But once you learn, you can do something. The problem we were solving for was, in the minds of the student, how do we get availability of high-quality tutoring at a low price, anytime, day or night, any language? Articulated. Our definition of success is if any student that has that need, thinks of Chegg first, comes to us and gets a successful connection with a tutor. And the business is, the definition of success is, can we 90% of the time match demand with supply, whatever time, day or night, and whatever subject. So if you look at our internal reports, they will tell you not only how many students, we project how many are going to come in a day, how many are coming in categories, and we have a number that says 90%. If we don't make 90%, then we have something to fix. So, and then the ultimate one is, do you bother? You say, is it big enough to matter? So if we're able to take our demand and match it with the appropriate supply, how big can this be? And my view is, if you look around the world at Tutor Group and other things in China, these companies are hundreds of millions of dollars. There's no reason why Chegg Tutors 5 years from now couldn't be its own $300-400 million business. Why? Because there's enough people learning online day or night around the world, and enough experts that will give them the answers. And so that's how we make decisions, which is, what problem are you solving for? Can you define success? If you can't define it, it's more important that you can define it than you actually hit it initially. Because there's no way to hit every thing you're doing when you're changing stuff that no one's ever done before. And then you got to ask yourself, is it big enough to matter? So when people come to me and say, Dan, we got to get into test prep, 3 years from now it could be $5 million, it's like, we don't have to get into test prep. There's 3.5 million students. I can name 3 companies that do $150 million each. You want to do $5 million, then go work for somebody else. So those 3 questions become the key. By the way, same question is on engagement. So the people who are in charge of design and engagement, they have to define success. How often do they believe the student should come in? How many hours should they use it? What should be, so we have things like NPS scores. Chegg's got an 80 NPS score. That's unheard of. Now we're going to the subgroups and saying, okay, what should tutoring be inside of Chegg? What should Chegg study be inside of Chegg? And those things get measured and they get compensated. So your compensation structure needs to match the answer to these 3 questions.
And I'm going to try to keep this program on time. Sorry. But no. Well, this has been awesome. But I will take a question or maybe
I'll be faster
2.
at the answers. Who's got
2,
one?
if anybody's got any questions for Dan.
Yes, sir.
Dan, thank you. Seeing both sides as you have, how's your perspective on being public versus being private? How does that impact your decision making right now?
So I'll give you the typical answer. It doesn't. Then I'll ask for the camera to be turned off. Look, it's like anything else. Everything has pros and everything has cons. So having liquidity, having access to more capital if you need it, having the discipline of being a public company is extraordinarily powerful. On the other hand, when you're in moments like the world we're living in right now, which is tremendous uncertainty, tremendous volatility, subscale internet companies getting clobbered as a category, regardless of individual companies, it's another variable you have to manage. So I would say that I'm agnostic, which means every situation comes with its challenges. As a private company, like we had a complicated cap table, we had no more access to capital, so our preference was to be public so we could clean all that up. As a public company in complicated times where you don't control your own destiny and investor sentiment changes and it may not match your long-term strategy, that doesn't feel so good either. But regardless, you just got to execute the same way. You got to do what you believe in. You got to articulate the problem you're solving for. You got to articulate, if you solve it, what your definition of success is. And then you got to convince people that that's big enough to matter and that you should have more runway to go do that. It's really no different if you've got a board. Like right now at private companies, it's nearly impossible to raise capital. So ask any of them, they would probably say they wish they were public right now. The grass isn't always greener. My good friend and my peer mentor, Shantanu Narayan of Adobe, always says, you know why the grass is always greener? Because there's a lot of shit on their grass, right? So I just say, it's out of my hands. We are public. So let's enjoy it. Let's go execute. Let's use the strengths of being a public company. Let's use all that and go execute. You know, there are days that are less pleasant than others, but there would be those same days if you were private, which there were when I was private. I had 13 board members. All of them had guaranteed seats. All of them had different perspectives on what they wanted, right? Go public tomorrow, never go public, sell the company, buy 50 more companies. It's just, the difference is with your, so you're always going to have bosses. So you just gotta be optimistic about it. So key is communication and articulation, listening and communicating. And then it is what it is. So that's a real answer.
And Dan has executed phenomenally as a public company. You have.
The stock hasn't. And
the stock hasn't, but you have, and ultimately the stock is. One last question. I should have said this at the beginning. We have a camera in the room, not because we look to publicly broadcast this, but we want to capture this and really create a library. We have the ability to edit it.
So you're not going to publish it?
So
let me tell you what I really think.
So just because, I should say that for everybody on, we're doing this so we have this great insight that we're able to keep and share with our group.
Look, you know, it's interesting. Silicon Valley, how many of you live out here? Then you know Silicon Valley is a very interesting town, which is you got venture capitalists. So if you go to the Warriors game, you can see the power order in Silicon Valley. All the courtside seats are venture capitalists. The next level up are founders. And then the level up after that are private wealth managers. And then there's the CEOs that didn't found companies. So if you ever want to understand the pecking order of Silicon Valley, just go to a Warriors game and see where everybody's sitting. I mean, the guy that bought the team is a venture capitalist. Get my point? So you know, for me, but the one thing in Silicon Valley that's unique is it is a town that appropriately worships founders and worships those that capitalize founders that are successful. But keep your eye on the non-founding operators, because Silicon Valley didn't have a lot of us. Now we do, and they're doing extraordinarily well, whether it's John Donahoe or Shantanu Narayan or Jeff Weiner over at LinkedIn. You're beginning to see that these technology companies at some point need that transition because these people aren't going to be around forever. So it's really interesting to see how this plays out. So we had one last question, and then I'll go back to sleep.
It's a bit of a selfish one. I just joined RaiseMe, which is a platform that's coming up with a novel way for kids to earn scholarship money for college from Ozzy, which is a site I know you guys both know well too.
Yeah.
So I'm coming in ahead.
So you quit Ozzy to go to RaiseMe.
Yeah.
So you suck, and great decision.
I keep my career firmly focused with YouTube. I'm trying to grow quick among high schoolers. So I'm trying to go after high schools, not just high schoolers, and become not just loved but necessary. And with your Chegg experience, I'm really interested for any first gut check or first lessons on how to go after that young demographic, especially like freshman year in high school, how to become really necessary for them.
Well, their parents could probably tell you that more than I can. So I think, you know, if you look at the breakout of the demographics of this country, the kids, you're ultimately, RaiseMe is a great company, by the way, and Ozzy Media is one of my favorite companies.
Carlos is here now.
Yeah, well, Carlos is just, he's a rock star. He's a former Goldman Sachs, CNN television star. He's got that perfect voice. Hate him. But RaiseMe, so again, you got to ask what problem you're solving for. So you have a very small constituent that you're going after. 50% of all high school students do not plan to and will not go to college. 50% of the high school students that do go to college will ultimately not get a degree of any kind. In fact, 85% of all students that go to community college or junior college, depending on which coast you live on, get no degree of any kind ever. So you have a lot of layers that you need to. So the problem you're solving for is you've got to find those kids who are likely to want to go to college, and will need funding, right? That's a complicated constituent because it's not the wealthy kids, because RaiseMe is not really for the wealthy kids. It's for wealthy families who want to help those kids. So you really have to find the right high schools where there's a great track record of financially challenged families who have a very high proclivity to go on to colleges. And that's where you need to live. And so there's a lot of ways to go do that, but mostly I think a path to going to do that is to figure out what these students already use that they need, plus to go directly to the high school guidance counselors. What are there, 16,000 high schools, only 4,400 colleges? You can even go work with the admissions office of the colleges that have a plan to go after students like that. You can get a real clear that what the demographic is, what the zip codes are, which high schools are around that, and then build programs to go through that, right? You can also work with people like Princeton Review or Kaplan who go to those schools to try to get those schools, you know, get people tutors and testing and those things. But I would say that a relationship with guidance counselors, a company Schoology, which has the LMS for all high schools. But so you know you're onto something, the number one search term by a high school student who intends to go to college, scholarships. So I would tell you to SEO those, and I would tell you to SEM those. Also, you could probably work with us because we have the second largest scholarship database. And they're not we offer scholarships, but it's really about connecting them to $1.1 billion worth of scholarship money available. And that's the way we acquire a lot of our high school students. So hopefully that was helpful.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all very much.